Right, we now come to the Middle East oral statement. Foreign Secretary David Lammy.
Well, with permission, Mr. Speaker, I will make a statement on the Middle East. On taking office in July, I told this House that this government's priority in the region would be to advance the cause of peace. And this continues to be our mission on every front. In Israel, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in the Red Sea, and of course in Gaza, where we need an immediate ceasefire, the protection of civilians, the immediate release of all hostages, and more aid getting into Gaza. Over the summer, we were faced with the prospect of full-scale war breaking out between Lebanese Hezbollah and Israel. On each of the 3 visits I've made to the region, including alongside my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, and most recently a joint visit with the French Foreign Minister Ségoné, I have urged Lebanese Hezbollah, the Lebanese government, and Israel to engage with the US-led discussions to resolve their disagreements diplomatically and to reach a peaceful resolution through the implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701. And as we continue to work with our allies and partners to push for a diplomatic solution, we nonetheless stand ready for the worst-case scenario, including the potential evacuation of British nationals. And our message to those still in Lebanon remains clear: leave now. Mr. Speaker, our common goal of peace in the Middle East will never be lasting until there is safety, security and sovereignty for both Israel and a Palestinian state. We must all keep at the forefront of our minds the pain, the anguish, the horror that this conflict has caused for so many ordinary civilians. The victims of the October the 7th atrocity, the hostages, and all those still enduring unimaginable suffering, whether they're hoping to see their loved ones again or mourning their loss, as the tragic events of this weekend illustrate, as the bodies of 6 murdered hostages were recovered. The Israeli people still living under rocket fire, not only from Hamas, but from other hostile actors explicitly dedicated to Israel's annihilation, fighting an enemy in Hamas whose appalling tactics endanger countless civilian lives. And the innocent Palestinians, tens of thousands killed in the fighting, their numbers growing by the day, including distressing numbers of women and children, many mothers so malnourished they cannot produce milk for their babies, families struggling to keep their children alive, disease and famine looming ever larger, heroic humanitarians putting their lives on the line to help others, like the brave aid workers I met from the United Nations agencies, and from the Palestinian Red Crescent Society warehouse I visited alongside France's foreign minister last month. Indeed, last Thursday, the UK led a session at the United Nations Security Council encouraging a continued global focus on the protection of civilians in Gaza, including the need for action on polio. And now, deeply worrying, the escalation we're seeing in the West Bank as well as in Gaza, with many communities facing settler violence amid an ongoing occupation, and so many on either side of this terrible conflict convinced that the world does not grasp the reality of Israel's predicament or the depth of Palestinian suffering. Throughout my life, I have been a friend of Israel, a liberal, progressive Zionist who believes in Israel as a democratic state and a homeland for the Jewish people, which has both the right to exist and defend itself. But I believe also that Israel will only exist in safety and security if there is a 2-state solution that guarantees the rights of all Israeli citizens and their Palestinian neighbours, who have their own inalienable right to self-determination and security. Mr. Speaker, as concern at the horrifying scenes in Gaza has risen, many in this House, as well as esteemed lawyers and international organisations, have raised British arms export licensing to Israel. After raising my own concerns from opposition on taking office, I immediately sought to update the review. And on my first appearance as Foreign Secretary in this House, I committed to sharing the review's conclusions. We have rigorously followed every stage of the process which the previous Conservative government established. And let me first be clear on the review's scope. This government is not an international court. We have not and could not arbitrate on whether or not Israel has breached international humanitarian law. This is a forward-looking evaluation, not a determination of innocence or guilt, and it does not prejudge any future determinations by the competent courts. But facing a conflict such as this, it is this government's legal duty to review export licences. Criteria 2C of the Strategic Export Licensing Criteria states that the government will not issue export licences if there is a clear risk that the items might be used to commit or facilitate serious violations of international humanitarian law. It is with regret that I inform the House today the assessment I have received leaves me unable to conclude anything other than that for certain UK arms exports to Israel, there does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. I have informed my Right Honourable friend, the Business and Trade Secretary, and he is therefore today announcing the suspension of around 30 from a total of approximately 350 to Israel as required under the Export Controls Act. These include equipment that we assess is for use in the current conflict in Gaza, such as important components which go into military aircraft, including fighter aircraft, helicopters and drones, as well as items which facilitate ground targeting. And for transparency, this government is publishing a summary of our assessment. Today I want to underline 4 points about these decisions. First, Israel's actions in Gaza continue to lead to immense loss of civilian life, widespread destruction to civilian infrastructure, and immense suffering. In many cases, it's not been possible to reach a determinative conclusion on allegations regarding Israel's conduct of hostilities, in part because there is insufficient information either from Israel or other reliable sources to verify such claims. Nevertheless, it is the assessment of His Majesty's government that Israel could reasonably do more to ensure life-saving food and medical supplies reach civilians in Gaza, in light of the appalling humanitarian situation. And this government is also deeply concerned by credible claims of mistreatment of detainees, which the International Committee of the Red Cross cannot investigate after being denied access to places of detention. Both my predecessor and all our major allies have repeatedly and forcefully raised these concerns with the Israeli government. Regrettably, they have not been addressed satisfactorily. Second, there can be no doubt that Hamas pays not the slightest heed to international humanitarian law.
You actually made it to the end of the video. Thank you for watching the video. If you would like to subscribe to the channel, which, why haven't you already, is somewhere over there. And also, if you want to watch more videos, also check out over there. I've been Jake from Just Jake. See you later.